Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and the moment you saw that Wing Attack was rebuffed, you had to know this video was coming. In today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at the newly rebuffed Wing Attack Shadow Charizard in the Great League. Shadow Charizard, at its peak, was my favorite Great League Pokemon of all time. Now it has 3 viable fast moves: Ember, Dragon Breath, and Wing Attack. Someone on the dev team really likes Charizard, and I've got to say, I am a very big fan of that person. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and let's take a look at the newly rebuffed Wing Attack Charizard. Hopping to the first match, and oh my goodness, what a lead! We lead Guzzlord into Corsola. My opponent safe switches into Furret, I bank a ton of energy, and then send in Corviknight. So far, unfortunately, we are just mercilessly hard countering this opponent in game number 1. Corviknight has a very nice matchup into Furret, and if my opponent ever tries to make a play for switch advantage, I'm very comfortable taking shield advantage for the Shadow Charizard and just blast burning everything in the endgame. But my opponent decides not to go for shield advantage. Instead, they are just going to let the Furret absorb the payback and get fully sand attack down. It does get a little bit close at the end, but Corviknight does have enough HP to get the farm down and exit with a payback loaded for the Corsola. My game plan is actually to send in the Charizard. If my opponent pivots instantly, I'm going to be up a turn, and if they stay in, I have Wing Attack as my fast move, which means as opposed to Ember, I can actually farm things down. So I'm going to be putting up the shield as they fire off the Nightshade. They stay in to try and make another Nightshade, but they just get fully farmed. In the back, oh no, it's Fortress with Bug Bite, and this game is over. Unfortunately, you could not get much more hard countered than that. We air cutter bait, and now we're almost at the back-to-back Blast Burns. Blast Burn picks up the one-hit knockout, down goes Fortress, and that is a good game. Picking up a very bad lead in game number 2, Guzzlord into Annihilate. I safe switch into Corviknight because I will get the air cutter before they get the close combat, but my opponent makes a very nice catch, absorbing that air cutter damage onto Empoleon. But bad news for my opponent, Corviknight gets the air cutter boost. Suddenly, my sand attacks are absolutely shredding through Empoleon's health bar. Empoleon's able to land the Hydro Cannon, but I just simply cannot be farmed down. I'm going to be full sending the payback. I want to guarantee a shield advantage or switch advantage. Payback lands, and they do get knocked out. Back in comes Annihilate. Annihilate will look to secure the KO with the Rage Fist, but now it's time. In comes Charizard. My opponent reveals their final Pokemon is Licky. I bank just a little bit of energy, only taking one rollout in the process, and then send in Guzzlord. Switch advantage was absolutely everything in this game. Licky would have destroyed my poor Charizard, but by Corviknight being able to win switch against Empoleon in the mid-game, now I should be set up for success. I have back-to-back Brutal Swings loaded on the Guzzlord. They're going to be no shield in the first, but I'm going to win charge stack priority on Brutal Swing number 2. My opponent should look at some point to try and pivot back into the Annihilate, I assume after this cap tie, and if they do, I do have quite a lot of energy on the Charizard already. There it is, in comes Annihilate, but Annihilate fires off the Rage Fist, and I'm going to be shielding everything as the Charizard. I should just be able to farm up to the back-to-back air cutters and be in a very comfortable spot. Air cutter is easily going to be enough to knock out that Annihilate, but I'm going to have so much residual energy for the Licky. Back in comes Licky, but Charizard is loaded. Air cutter is going to get the shield. Licky tries for a farm down that they're simply not going to get. Charizard with Wing Attack getting revenge on one of its hardest counters, knocking out Licky and securing the win. We move to the next match, picking up a terrible lead Guzzlord into Wigglytuff. I'm going to immediately safe switch into Corviknight, and my opponent responds with Empoleon. Now this is a matchup that can definitely go either way. It all comes down to the bait versus new calls from the Corviknight. If Corviknight is able to get an air cutter shielded or land a payback, either should put the Corviknight in a pretty good spot. I really like full sending in this matchup because I can guarantee either big damage or a shield advantage. Specifically when it comes to having a Shadow Charizard in the back, shield advantage is very nice, but in this case I do have to go for switch advantage because I can't afford to have Wigglytuff on my Guzzlord. Back in comes the Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff going to be hit with air cutter after air cutter. A boost here would be really nice. Unfortunately, we don't get the boost, but even still, Corviknight should be able to get quite a bit of damage onto the Wigglytuff. Air cutter number 2 is going to land. I should be able to even make a payback here. My opponent sends in their own Corviknight, but this payback is going to hurt. This is going to do quite a lot of damage. I could have just let the Corviknight get farmed down so that way I wouldn't be switch locked. However, I think that I'm going to need to make a catch onto the Corviknight later because that Wigglytuff has a ton of energy. They're going to fire off air cutter after air cutter at the Guzzlord, but Guzzlord really does not mind this whatsoever. What I do need to be careful of is my opponent switching in the Wigglytuff. So I'm actually going to let them fire off the air cutter here just to ensure that more of my switch timer gets burned. In comes the Wigglytuff. I build up to the Sludge Bomb and bait with the Brutal Swing. I'm expecting that my opponent is going to throw one charm and then fire off their move, so I'm going to wait down my timer. Send in the Charizard, do one wing attack, and catch onto the Corviknight, and that is going to seal this game. Because now, I should just be able to fully farm them down. However, I'm going to make sure to fire off the Air Cutter here, because my opponent kind of has to shield this. If they don't shield it, they don't have a way to win the game, but if they shield it, they also don't have a way to win the game, because then Charizard is just going to wing attack them down. So Charizard, with the help of a very clutch catch, is going to secure this game. In comes the Corviknight, but it's just too little, too late. The Corviknight is taking too much damage. Air Cutter takes the knockout. We wing attack down the Wigglytuff and take the win. Guzzlord into Empoleon, a very neutral matchup. I'm very happy to catch the Empoleon here, because that way it's not on the Charizard. Charizard can do pretty okay into Empoleon, but I would need a slight energy advantage. Brutal Swing is going to connect onto the Empoleon. They're over-farming quite a bit, so I throw 2, wait a turn, and then catch the Drill Peck onto Corviknight. Corviknight, going to be more than happy to absorb that energy. The unfortunate thing about this situation is the Empoleon is in a very awkward health range. The Empoleon is not in a range where I can Sand Attack it and knock it out with an Air Cutter. So I'm going to go for a bit of a weird play. I'm going to go for an Undercharge, and I'm actually going to leave the Empoleon alive. My goal here is just to try and get a massive wing attack down with the Shadow Charizard. So, in comes the Charizard, my opponent pivots and sends in a Shadow Dragonite. That is not a Pokemon that I was expecting to see here. When I saw the typing, I assumed it was Altaria. Altaria would have been pretty bad because my Guzzlord has a terrible defense stat, which means Altaria Dragon Breaths do more damage to me than the typical Guzzlord. However, unfortunately for me, Dragonite is still pretty bad because that Dragon Tail did not land. Their Dragon Breath picked up the knockout first, and now that means I can't wing attack them down. I'm going to go from 2 shields to 0 in a split second, and now I could be in trouble. It all comes down to what they have in the back. In the back, they have Shelgon. I farm up to the back-to-back Air Cutters, but I think that's a charge attack priority tie. Shelgon has very efficient pacing. If it's not, I can win the game, but unfortunately it is. Shadow Charizard so close to pulling off the sweep, but it's not to be, as Twister takes the knockout and gets the win for my opponent. Guzzlord into Quagsire in the next match. This is a pretty okay matchup for the Guzzlord because since they're non-shadow, the Stone Edge is going to basically do no damage. I would really like to get damage onto this Quagsire, and hopefully they're not going to be able to store a lot of energy because Quagsire energy would be very scary for the Charizard. They go for the Stone Edge. I fire off the Brutal Swing, and my opponent actually catches onto Drapion. This is a very nice catch for my opponent, because Drapion, once Guzzlord has lost about half of its HP, suddenly Drapion has an amazing matchup there. I send in the Corviknight. I did debate running my attack-weighted Corviknight to specifically breakpoint Drapion, but I realized that if I'm running Shadow Charizard, I probably just need the bulk of a bulkier Corviknight, so I ended up running my one that is massively defense-weighted. Drapion will fire off another Crunch. That's going to get me very low, and my opponent goes for the combo play and brings back in the Quagsire. The Quagsire is non-shadow, which means they're a lot bulkier than normal. That means I think I'm going to have to burn both shields if I try for the farm down, so I'm just going to opt out. I'm going to save a ton of energy on the Charizard and catch the Aqua Tail onto the Guzzlord. Guzzlord's only 2 off the Brutal Swing. Now they're in a very awkward spot. They kind of can't really afford to shield the Quagsire. They're forced to let it go, and they lose that energy. My opponent is going to be waiting down their full timer and sending in Sableye. It's going to be close. Can Sableye get the farm down? No! They actually end up catching the Brutal Swing onto Drapion. I go for the Undercharge on the Brutal Swing, get the wing attack down with Charizard, and now Charizard is about to absolutely destroy the Sableye. I don't even think that I need to throw a Blast Burn to win this game. I think I can just go straight Air Cutter because of the fast move pressure of Wing Attack. Wing Attack should just allow me to Air Cutter and then farm down. I fire off the Air Cutter, they call the bait, but it just does not matter. Charizard Wing Attacks down Sableye and takes the win. We get the Dream Lead in the next match, Guzzlord into Jellicent. My opponent safe switches into Gliscor. I get to bank 4 Dragon Tails of energy and then send out a Brick Wall in Corviknight. However, this is the game that I learned that Gliscor is a very big problem, because by giving Gliscor an energy head start, I've given Gliscor the tools to flip this matchup. Because Gliscor is going to go for the back-to-back Sand Tombs, and now I've lost half my health, I'm in -2, and I am definitely getting knocked out by Acrobatics. That is a little bit uncomfortable. However, this is a prime opportunity to go for energy lead on the Shadow Charizard. So, Gliscor actually able to flip switch against the Corviknight. Gliscor is such a strong Pokemon. I get a big energy head start on my Charizard. Back in comes the Jellicent. I'm going to bank a ton of energy and then go for the Snipe with the Guzzlord. This should pressure a shield away from my opponent, so even if there's a bad matchup for the Guzzlord in the back, as a Costume Beware is revealed, I should hopefully be okay. If they're running Beware, they're going to be running Drain Punch, so I am going to be no shielding. Drain Punch does do a lot of damage and boosts up the defense of the Beware. Sludge Bomb, not going to do as much damage as it typically would due to that defense boost. I will get the Brutal Swing, but no, my opponent's going to fire off another Drain Punch. They take super effective damage from Wing Attack, they are +2, and that just feeds so much energy to the Charizard. Back in comes the Jellicent. I'm at 100 energy to back-to-back Blast Burns. No point in baiting. Blast Burn connects, Jellicent gets rocked, and from this point, it's just all over. Shadow Charizard taking over, Blast Burn into Air Cutter, taking the win, and the 2-shield flex. We pick up a pretty nice lead in the next match, Guzzlord into Azumarill. Now this is a matchup where my opponent makes a pretty critical misplay. My opponent does not commit to the play rough. Even though Ice Beam hits for super effective damage, Guzzlord does not have to respect it because an Ice Beam never allows the Azumarill to bubble down. Add to that the fact that Guzzlord has a pacing advantage, now I can guarantee get a shield advantage and get good damage onto the Azumarill without having to expend a shield. So my opponent's decision to not build up to the play rough really ended up backfiring. They safe switch Primeape, I respond with the Shadow Charizard. Even if I get close combated here, I'm still gonna no shield. But they only end up going for the Rage Fist. Rage Fist, very okay by me. I'm gonna fire off this Air Cutter, and unless they want to give up their final shield, they're losing that Primeape. No boost for the Charizard, but I know if I can make it to a Blast Burn, even when resisted, is so threatening that Azumarill will have to respect this. Blast Burn does get the final shield. Azumarill exits with all the energy in the world as in comes Corviknight. As Corviknight, I'm going to look to tank one, shield one, and then sand attack them into a range where I can knock them out with Air Cutter. They should be fully dry, so I should be able to do 14 sand attacks and the Air Cutter, and I'm very comfortable just exiting with as much energy as I possibly can. My opponent reveals their final Pokemon is a Whimsicott. Oh no, Whimsicott just has nowhere it can go. Air Cutter hits for super effective damage. We're gonna go for the Bad Manners catch as well, catching the Moonblast onto our very low HP Guzzlord. Back in comes Corviknight. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We see a very familiar lead in the next match, Guzzlord into Shadow Quagsire. The Shadow Quagsire, in my eyes, is a little bit scarier because the Stone Edge does hit quite a bit harder. However, Guzzlord is still going to do pretty well here, as Brutal Swing plus the Dragon Tail is going to be getting this Quagsire extremely low. Quagsire will connect with the Stone Edge. This is going to hurt. Stone Edge lands, Guzzlord survives, making the Brutal Swing, and my opponent makes a very nice catch and sneak onto Galarian Weezing. Galarian Weezing is a very scary Pokemon to see on ladder because, since Go Battle League doesn't have team sheets, you have no idea what it's running. This could have Overheat and one-shot me, so I have to respect it, and unfortunately my opponent shows that they do not have Overheat. I guess it makes sense, Brutal Swing for the Jellicents of the world, but man, I really regret that shield now, because now my Charizard is at a shield disadvantage, which is not where you want to be as the Charizard player. My opponent reveals their final Pokemon is a Malamar. I farm up past the payback, and I'm going to bait with the Air Cutter. I'm still outside of a range where Foul Play could knock me out. If they go for Superpower, it's going to be very, very close. I decide to let this go. I'm saying that I live. They go Foul Play. It does not take the knockout. They needed to go for the Superpower, and I'm able to make the payback. Payback is going to be shielded. I pivot into the Guzzlord, and unfortunately for me, this game is going to come down to a 50-50. My opponent will be able to force my final shield with the Malamar, and they have a move banked on the Quagsire. So I'm going to have to burn the final shield on Charizard, and I'm going to have to perfectly predict when they snipe with the Quagsire energy. Well, I call it a 50-50. It's probably more of a 10-90. I'm just going to predict that they blind switch here, and they don't blind switch. Great patience from my opponent. They did not go for the obvious play, but the moment I was at a shield deficit, I was in trouble. I tried to predict the combo again by switching into Corviknight, but my opponent just farms down the Corviknight, knocks me out with the Aqua Tail. Very well played there to my opponent. They were able to leverage that shield advantage incredibly well. Picking up a pretty nice lead in the next match, Guzzlord into Golbat. My opponent safe switches into Galarian Stunfisk, and this is when I realize I don't really have a strong answer to this Mon. I farm up a bunch, wait a turn, and go for the Earthquake catch onto the Corviknight, but my opponent went for a Rock Slide bait. That's a nice bait for my opponent, not letting me get the flashy catch. I should still be in an okay spot because Corviknight does survive 3 Rock Slides, and the Mud Shots are going to be doing basically nothing. However, speaking of doing nothing, my Sand Attacks are really not doing much to his Stunfisk. Another Rock Slide is going to land. I'm going to farm up, go for the payback. Their switch timer's up, and they get the catch of the payback onto Golbat. They recognize that I don't have a strong answer to the Galarian Stunfisk, so they're just saving that Stunfisk for later, which I think is a pretty nice play on their part. Brutal Swing lands. I'm not quite going to get the farm down before they make the Poison Fang, or I guess they could be running Air Cutter as well, but it turns out they are actually running Poison Fang. Back in comes the Stunfisk. Stunfisk will get chipped away by the Brutal Swing. Now, the thing that I'm not sure of is at -1 defense, can I survive a Rock Slide? It's going to be very, very close. I say yes. I'm putting my faith in Guzzlord. Guzzlord delivers. It's a simultaneous switch. Shadow Charizard into Shadow Annihilate. We now have identical pacing 5-4, but Charizard wins charge stack priority. I get the boost from the Air Cutter as well, and this game is over. Oh my goodness, Charizard. Look at the wing attacks go. Annihilate getting torn to smithereens. Annihilate is able to force the final Protect Shield, but Charizard exits with a full Blast Burn loaded, and there is just no path forward for my opponent in this game. Charizard going for the Blast Burn. Do they respect it? They do not. Down goes Stunfisk. And man, I am so happy that Wing Attack is back on Charizard. All in all, I had so much fun getting to run this team. A lot of these battles were actually done at the DMV. I was getting my driver's license renewed, and the DMV has some pretty atrocious wait times. There was definitely some games that I feel that I could have played quite a bit better. I was in a bit of a distracting environment, but I still could have locked in more. That's definitely on me. But man, Charizard now has 3 viable fast moves. I think that it really comes down to personal preference as to what you want to run. Dragon Breath allows Charizard to kind of be a Dragon Slayer. Ember is the hyper pacing version of Charizard, where it's straight 4 to Air Cutter. Wing Attack, the pacing is slightly worse, but you have a lot more fast move pressure, and it plays a lot like Peak Charizard did back in the day. The Charizard, I think it's a strong anti-meta force. Even though Charizard is returned to its old parameters, the meta around it has gotten a lot stronger, and that's part of why I think Charizard, it's very strong anti-meta. I don't think it breaks into the core meta per se, but man, I had so much fun getting to run Shadow Wing Attack Charizard again. It really felt very nostalgic to have Charizard back farming things down, and now with the ability to boost up its wing attacks, which it didn't have before. I think the biggest drawback by far to Charizard is the fact that all 3 of its viable fast moves, Wing Attack, Ember, and Dragon Breath, they all require an elite fast DM. I would love to see some of those fast attacks no longer be legacy anymore, whether it's even just Wing Attack and Ember, the 2 that weren't a part of a comm day, because I believe Dragon Breath was part of the comm day. That would be a really nice adjustment that they could make to make Charizards a lot easier to build. So I definitely think that Charizard actually genuinely has 3 viable fast moves now. Wing Attack Charizard feels incredibly fun to run, and it's just going to come down to personal preference. I think Charizard, no matter the moveset, can be a very strong anti-meta option, and it basically just comes down to your playstyle. You want it to be more of a Dragon Slayer, but that struggles more against the Azumarill, then you could run Dragon Breath. If you want just hyper pacing, go Ember, and if you want a little bit more fast move pressure, then you can go Wing Attack. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed watching it, please do leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And an extra special thank you, as always, to our channel members here on YouTube. The support guys provide to the channel is so appreciated, so thank you guys so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.